Welcome to another episode of the Practical SQL Server HA show. My name is Edwin Sarmiento, and welcome. If you're joining in for the very first time, the goal of the Practical SQL Server HA show is to share tips and tricks, lessons learned, mistakes made, best practices, not so best practices, related to anything SQL Server high availability and or disaster recovery solutions. If you're a technical operator, you're a database administrator, systems administrator, network engineer, sometimes even a developer, and you just happen to be sitting beside the database server, and you're now responsible for taking care of it, managing it, this is for you. On the other end of that spectrum, this is also for decision makers, whether you're the CIO, CTO, team lead of your database administration team, or even a program manager thinking of incorporating a SQL Server features in your product. For you, this is to give you some insights as to whether or not either your team is ready to support or build a high availability and or disaster recovery solution, or it made sense, or it makes sense to even implement something like some of the fancy high availability and disaster recovery features from SQL Server. This is the very first episode for the year 2026, and I like going through, and this episode is kind of like something that I do with my customers every year, specifically first couple of weeks of the year, mainly because it sets the tone for the entire year and to prepare for whatever you need to manage throughout the year. And it's good to have some sort of a planning framework to prepare for the year ahead. And it's more than just in your technical infrastructure. It's more than just for laying the groundwork for what you want to accomplish throughout the year. It's also something that you can use for professional and personal development. Some people would like to use New Year's resolutions and write down goals that they want to achieve for the year. This is kind of like the equivalent for your high availability and or disaster recovery solutions. In fact, one of the reasons I do these with my customers is because businesses evolved, and the more businesses evolve, the more you need to ask these questions. I want to call these the 3 questions to ask your existing, or to ask for your existing HADR solutions 2026 edition. And I say 2026 edition again, mainly because of the fact that I've worked with customers throughout the years, helped them either design, build, maintain, roll out high availability and disaster recovery solutions throughout the years. And as part of the growth of the business, this is something that you have to constantly ask. And again, make sure that you have your pen and paper ready, start taking notes on what these questions are. I'm going to jump right into it right now. First question that you need to ask: do they still meet your business requirements? Okay. Do your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solutions, combination of one or more features or solutions, do they still meet your business requirements? One of the most common misconceptions when it comes to high availability and disaster recovery solutions, especially when it's actually doing its work, meaning it's living up to the expectation. You built a high availability and or disaster recovery solution, and it is just working perfectly. Kind of like a set and forget thing. It's working fine, right? You've built it once, it's not giving you any headaches, which means you've designed it properly to a point where it's not causing you a lot of headaches. However, as time goes on, like I said in the beginning, businesses grow, it evolves. You're accumulating massive amounts of data as part of the growth of the business. The question you need to ask yourself is, do your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solutions still meet your business requirements? I'll use a very simple and a very basic example, backups, right? Backups. We can talk about backups. It could be as boring as hell talking about backups. And when you started creating a backup strategy, and of course, keeping in mind that it's more than just the backup strategy, but it's also the restore strategy. Okay, making sure that you're creating a backup strategy that would, or restore strategy even, that would meet your recovery point and recovery time objectives. Again, I'll use the backup example. Let's say in the beginning you've set up a SQL Server instance, and you've got like about 20 plus databases in there, and you decided, hey, the databases are relatively small. We can take full database backups every single day. Combination of full plus transaction log backups to meet our recovery point objective. Sure, it's fine. So you're running your daily backups at, let's say, 12 in the morning, 12 midnight, because that's when there's not a lot of transactions going on with the database, and it's now humming along. You've had it for the past, what, year, 2 years, and it's humming along. Every backup is successful. Initially, the backup would probably take you less than 20 minutes. And again, as the business grows, as the business accumulates or collects more data as part of business transactions, the databases grow. So your 20 minutes is now 40 minutes, or an hour and a half, or 2 hours and a half. And we're just talking about backups here. We're not even talking about restores. When was the last time you did a restore? Okay. And when you did your restore, how long did it take for the restore to complete? And these are the types of questions that you need to ask with your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solutions. And like I said, I'm only focusing on backups here, right? I'm only focusing on backups. I can look at so many different things that you can think about. Like, for instance, always on availability groups. Sure, we can measure the amount of time it takes to fail over, which is your recovery time objective. And I'll use the same example. Initially, you got like 25 databases in there. You put every database in a single availability group. The databases are relatively small, so the failover time, given the amount of data, the amount of transaction log records generated as part of collecting business transactions, failover time could be 45 seconds or less, right? But again, that's for smaller databases. As the business grows, you collect more data, more transactions are generated, more transaction log records are generated within SQL Server, transaction log volume increases, and so there's more transaction log records to be redone and undone on the secondary replica. When was the last time you tested your failover time, and did it meet your recovery time objective? Okay, and that's what it means when you ask the question, do you still, or do they still meet your business requirements? Okay, and this is just part of the evolution of the company, the growth of the company. Maybe you've used native SQL Server database backups in the past, and then you started incorporating third-party tools, maybe an enterprise backup tool, or maybe with virtual machines, you started incorporating virtual machines that have agents for SQL Server database backups. You've included that. When was the last time you've tested those backups? And when was the last, restore, right? It's not enough for you to say, hey, the backup's successful, right? Because and this is something that I tell my customers, which is kind of controversial. I don't really believe in backups. I believe in successfully making sure. I believe in making sure that your backups can be successfully restored. Two different things, right? And so this is part of asking that question. Do your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solution still meet your business requirements? Okay, and I can go on and explore different avenues of this. I've just given you 2 examples, one of which is for the database backups. How long does it take for you to take the backups, and how long does it take for you to now restore those backups? I've seen backups where they started out, backup jobs would take like 4 hours. because of the size of the databases and the size of the databases and the number of databases within a SQL Server instance. I've seen backups go, and that's for native SQL Server database backups, not third-party SQL Server database backups. I've also seen backups go beyond certain number of hours. That's now impacting business operations, right? So again, what used to take like 2 hours, 4 hours, now it's 6 hours, and your business operation is probably around 20 hours, and so there's not enough time for the backups to complete that would not impact business operation. I've seen those cases. I've also seen cases where restores are now taking longer than initially planned for meeting recovery time objectives. So if a recovery time objective for database is 1 hour, now what used to take like 30 minutes to restore a database, now it's taking 1 hour and a half, or 2 hours, or 4 hours. It's going beyond, going past the recovery time objective, and so it's no longer meeting your business requirements. Time to reevaluate the kinds of strategies that you need to implement to make sure that your existing HADR solutions are still meeting your business requirements. So that's the first one. I did say 3 questions, right? That's the first question. The second question has everything to do with your modernization strategy. So what is your modernization strategy? And this is a never-ending task. This is, I want to say this is job security for tech professionals, because this is something that you have to keep doing over and over and over and over and over again because of the life cycle of every platform that you're using. One example of this is recently Microsoft just released the latest version of SQL Server 2025. And so with SQL Server 2025 being out, I'm not saying you immediately jump into the latest and the greatest. I'm saying look at what you currently have. Do you still have versions of either your operating system or your database platform that is no longer supported? Right? I'm not going to ask you to simply upgrade to, let's say, SQL Server 2025 just because. Besides, I don't get kickbacks for recommending that you upgrade to Enterprise Edition or the latest version of SQL Server. I wish Microsoft would pay me commissions for recommending that customers upgrade. But I don't recommend just for the sake of recommending. I recommend upgrading for 2 reasons. One, it actually meets your business requirements. Like for instance, upgrading to a version that supports a feature that the business needs. That's one. Like for instance, a lot of customers, they want to migrate off of SQL Server Standard Edition and move up to Enterprise Edition because they have Enterprise Edition has specific features only available on Enterprise Edition that they can use for high availability and disaster recovery that meets the business requirements. Okay, it all goes back to the business requirements. That's the first one. The second, I did say 2 reasons, right? The second reason is you want to be officially supported still. I wouldn't be surprised if you're still running SQL 2000 or SQL Server 2005. I've seen those. I remember the time, and this was a 2010, 2011 timeframe. We were still supporting SQL Server 6.5. It is no longer officially supported as far as Microsoft is concerned, but they were using a third-party app that's critical to the business, and they need to keep it up and running. And Microsoft's it's no longer supporting that version, so they need to look someplace else for support. So those are the only reasons that I would recommend that you upgrade to whether the latest, the greatest, or a higher edition, is to make sure that that latest and the greatest version is addressing a business requirement, like a feature or an addition that supports what the business needs. And second one, of course, officially supported still. So what are your modernization strategies? We're looking at an entire year of planning and making sure that you keep your high availability, or you keep your databases highly available, resilient. Okay, and so part of that is looking at support. If you're still running on SQL Server 2008, I'm pretty sure it's no longer officially supported. Even SQL Server 2017 at this point is nearing end of support. So if you're thinking of upgrading, might as well upgrade to the latest and the greatest version, but also looking at it from a support point of view, where not just Microsoft support, but also your application vendor support. I've also seen cases where application vendors would say, hey, we don't support that version yet. So you're tied to your application vendor support when it comes to implementing a specific version of SQL Server. So what is your modernization strategy? Either you're sunsetting older hardware, or because of the whole VMware Broadcom merger, the acquisition, maybe you're now thinking, hey, we need to move away from VMware, but what's the next move? What platform are we going to move into? So part of your modernization strategy is just, we are moving away from VMware, moving into whatever platform we're choosing. We still want to make sure that that platform is supported and will meet our business requirements as far as high availability and disaster recovery is concerned. Okay, so even if it's a hardware upgrade, an operating system upgrade, or migration, SQL Server version and edition upgrade, maybe virtualization platform upgrade, migration, okay, that is going to be part of your modernization strategy. Or even as simple as, hey, what cumulative update do we need to install, because this is a critical update. Okay, it's a GDR and we have to put it in. Or maybe it's a Windows update, a security update that would fix an issue from like a couple of months back, but we haven't implemented it yet. So that's going to be part of your modernization strategy. Don't just look at it as, we need to upgrade, we need to replace. No, it's keeping your entire data platform estate as not just modernized, but in a supported state, supported, reliable, highly available, secure, the way it's meant to be. Okay, and you have to ease this into your planning at the beginning of the year, because it's, especially if you're doing a platform migration, it's not going to be an overnight or over the weekend kind of thing. You got to plan for it, especially if you're dealing with high availability systems. You can't just do a lift and shift, or you can't just do it over the weekend without properly testing your strategies. Because now that you have a high availability solution in place, you got to be concerned and you got to be cautious about your recovery point and recovery time objective as you're doing the modernization. Okay, so we got a couple of different things. Could be a hardware upgrade, operating system upgrade, SQL Server version and or edition upgrade, virtualization, even installation of hot fixes. You have to plan this. Okay, you have to plan this as early as the beginning of the year, so you can ease through it throughout the year and within the next couple of months. Plus, of course, being strategic about it. I've seen companies and customers who would upgrade their Windows operating system but not SQL Server for a couple of other reasons, like, you know, the app vendor does not support that version yet, and so they have to push it back. Or sometimes they only upgrade SQL Server but not Windows. I tend to be strategic about it because I don't want to do work that's unnecessary. If I can bundle both, the operating system and SQL Server at the same time, upgrading them to whatever version I want, so I only have to do it once. I only have to, because you're still going to do testing. You're still going to validate your applications. You're still going to validate SQL Server. You're still going to validate your high availability and or disaster recovery solutions. Why not just do it in one shot? So combining both your operating system and your SQL Server in the modernization process, I like to streamline it and keep it in one piece. Most consultants don't, because it's more billable hours that they could charge customers. I don't like that. I would prefer not working more than what I need to. So I'm looking for ways on how I can streamline, make it efficient, to do less work, but still accomplish the same goal. Okay, so that's the second question. Okay, first one is, do your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solutions still meet your business requirements? The second one is, what is your modernization strategy? And again, think in terms of hardware refreshes, operating systems, SQL Server updates, upgrades, whether it's version or edition and or cumulative updates, platform updates or modernization, maybe moving away from an existing platform to a new platform, or even as simple as applying GDRs or CUs to your existing infrastructure, your SQL Server instances. Okay, so that's the second question. The third question, this is something that you really have to think about as the business grows. The third question is, do you still have enough staff coverage? Okay, do you still have enough staff coverage? I emphasize the importance of looking at high availability and or disaster recovery as a team sport, not an individual sport. I feel bad for the one-man IT shop, because if you're running a 24/7 system, I do not expect you to be available 24/7. Some people try. That's not a good idea because it's not sustainable. Okay? You have to have at least a minimum of 2 so you can rotate on-call assignments, you can rotate support, you can rotate days and weekends off, so it becomes sustainable. And in the beginning, I set off the premise that this is a byproduct of growing, a business growing, right? You're accumulating more data, you're collecting more data as a side effect of business transactions, and so the amount of work also increases. I remember one DBA telling me the story about how when he first joined the company, there were like 12, 15 SQL Server instances, and one database administrator can manage those. Now they've got like 40 plus to 50 plus SQL Server instances with now terabytes worth of database size, and he's still the only person managing it. The amount of workload has increased, but not the number of people managing it. Now, I can understand you can always streamline your work and always automate, but you have to have enough people on staff so you're covered with your high availability solution. Like I said, I don't expect anybody to be managing a 24/7 solution 24/7. You gotta eat, you gotta sleep, you gotta go and have breaks, you gotta go on vacation, have your weekends, live a life. So you have to make sure that you have your team has enough staff coverage. And it's more than just enough staff coverage, because the way I look at this, it has to be both available and capable. Okay? Note the word and. Team availability, members of your team, is not enough. You may have enough staff coverage, but what good is available people if they're not capable? Okay. Meaning, if you're supporting a let's say a 4 replica availability group across 3 different people, let's say one availability group with 3 replicas or 4 replicas, and you got like 3 people, you want to make sure that all those 3 are capable enough to support something like a complex availability group solution. You don't want to be in a position where, oh, all 3 of us are supporting this, but we have no clue how it works, because a managed services provider set it up, or a vendor or a consultant designed, implemented it, managed it, and I have no clue how to support it. Okay, so you ask that question, do you still have enough staff coverage, especially given the massive layoffs and people being let go? Right? Because that's kind of like how the business works nowadays, where, okay, you guys can accomplish more with fewer number of people. Why don't we lay off people? Why don't we get rid of some of our staff? Which is kind of hard to hear, especially with businesses. But if you are managing a high availability solution, you have to make sure that you have enough staff available to keep the 24/7 highly available solution humming along and supporting that system. Okay? I did say both available and capable. It's not enough for you to have available people but not capable. It's also not enough for you to have capable people but not available. Like, most senior guy has 15 years of experience, but he turns off his phone and he's not available, because I would do that too if I'm not working. I don't recommend that you work 24/7. So it's not enough for you to have available people. It's also not enough for you to have capable people. You have to have both available and capable people to make sure that when something happens, your team, not just you, your team can pick up whatever issue has to be picked up on, address the issue, and still meet your recovery point and recovery time objectives. Okay? Did I miss anything? I don't think I have. 3 questions that you need to ask this beginning of the year when it comes to your existing high availability and or disaster recovery solutions. 1, do your existing HADR solutions still meet your business requirements? So re-evaluating types of backups, types of HA solution, types of your strategies. Are they still meeting your business requirements? 2, what is your modernization strategy looking like for the next couple months? Because the beginning of the year is the perfect time to actually plan it, so that you can have enough, you'll have enough time for execution, for planning, for testing, for validating, rolling back if something goes wrong, and then making sure that you have enough staff. Why do I keep saying stuff? Enough staff available so you can support and maintain your high availability and or disaster recovery solution. That is about it for, I like to stop at 3 because it's easier to remember. That's about it for this episode of the Practical SQL Server HADR show. Tune in again next week for another episode. And if you need help with anything related to SQL Server high availability and or disaster recovery, reach out. Use that link on the screen. This will lead you to my calendar page where you can pick and choose a time that works for you. Normally, some people reach out and based on their current challenges, normally if it's just a question, just send me an email, right? But normally, usually, people would reach out to me when they're in, let's say, we want to evaluate this particular solution, but we don't have the capabilities. We don't know if it's the right solution, or we want to build it, but we don't have the skills and the capabilities. They would use this so that I can you evaluate whether or not it's something that they can pursue, it's worthwhile pursuing, right? Sometimes they're in a bit of a bind. They already have an existing high availability solution or disaster recovery solution sometimes, and it's causing them more problems than this problem that it's supposed to solve. And so they would reach out to me and I would evaluate whether or not we can address those issues. Okay? Part of that is getting clear on what their challenges are, the problems are. And the second part of that is just coming up with the next steps, meaning what's the next proper thing that they need to do in order to either resolve the problem, address the issue, and if necessary, bring me on board to help them go through that. Use that link on the screen, schedule a strategy session, and let's have that conversation. Happy to help in any way I can. I think that's it. That's a wrap. Tune in again for the next episode of the Practical SQL Server HADR show. My name is Edwin Sarmiento, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll see you again in the next episode. Goodbye.